All right, tonight's demonstration is going to be the birdhouse that I brought in, and I'm going to try to demonstrate it for you guys that are brand new and keep it simple, and show you how I do it with the techniques I've learned here at the club. If you ever get a chance to get to the external meetings like at a Paul's, it's a great time to learn stuff. I use a jam chuck on this stuff, and I'm going to pass one of these around. Hand that to you. Roger made this for me at one of the turning days probably 7 years ago, and I used it until last year, and that's what I'm going to use here. When I first started turning birdhouses, I would chuck up the wood and hollow everything out and do it really the hard way, and then Roger gave a demonstration at one of these meetings showing a jam chuck method, and I've done it that way ever since, and it's great if you're going to do production turning like Craig mentioned earlier today. What I do is I start out with, I've got components. You've got the roof of the birdhouse, you've got the bottom of the birdhouse, there's the perch, and then there's the base. And for the bottom, I've got some papers here if people want, need something to go by after I'm done. But I use 1.5 inch stock for the birdhouse bottoms, and it's 1.5 inch square by 2¼ inches deep. And the first thing I do is I go through and cut all my components out to the size that I need. Then I come back and set them up in a drill press. And for the bottoms, I take a 1 inch Forstner bit and I drill down 1.5 inches and I set them aside. And when we do this, we'll do production work. Like right now, Tim talked me into doing 20 of these for our giveaways. So I'll run 20 of these out at one time, and I'll do 20 roofs and 20 bases. But before I get to the lathe, I'll cut all this out on the chop saw. And if you don't have chop saws and stuff in your shop, you can certainly do this stuff on here with a Jacobs chuck and a drill to do all your drilling here. But I'm going from a production environment. You can even set up jigs to hold it in place where you can drill down if you got hand drills, but just make something that will screw to a tabletop. We'll hold that in square for each one of these different sizes that you use. So there's a bunch of different ways to set the stuff up. So keep in mind you can adjust or whatever. And as far as the shape of the birdhouse, the artistic license is wide open for everybody. You can get as crazy as you want, get as simple as you want. But a lot of you probably are brand new to the club this year, haven't made birdhouse, so I'm going to keep it just straightforward, some simple cuts. You can decide when you want to, put burn marks in it or put finials on them or whatever. So I start out with those bases, and this is 1.5 by 1.5 by 2¼ The rooftop, I usually do a contrasting color. I'll do cherry for the bottom, and a top I'll do a walnut. And that is a 2 inch square that I use. And then I cut a 1¼ inch Forstner in there. And the way I do it is go down about half the depth of the Forstner blade, or at least deep enough to grab onto your jaws for that. So, and that is 1¼ inch on the thickness on it with a 2 inch square. I've got this stuff on a sheet for everybody, so I've got 15 copies. If I don't have enough, I can certainly send it to an email. So that'll get your main two components. And for a base, I will go back and forth. Sometimes I'll just cut squares out of lumber, right or the edge, and I'll offset like the hook on there. But since it's a turning demo night, when I do round bases for that birdhouse, I'll take a 3 inch square stock and I slice them in 3/4 inch. And then you want to go with a 2 inch Forstner bit deep enough in there for your jaws to grip. And usually I gauge about half that blade. And the nice thing about if you've got a drill press is that once you set your first block up, you just slide them in a holding device and you've got your depth gauges and you can come to the same one. So it goes pretty quick if you've got that set up with depth stops and stuff on your drill press. If not, do it by hand. Like I said, a good gauge is about half the depth of most of the Forstner bits. So, Forstner bits, I used one from Gary Gronberg in the club, had those Freud bits, and I used one of his one time. I went ahead and started investing in it. I just replaced my 1 inch bit after about 5 years. Those things are just extremely sharp, and my others were burning up and wearing out, and it's just good steel. So if you can invest in those, I think in the long run you're probably saving money over a cheaper bit. Those Freuds, Fruit or Freud, it's I like their table saw blades, and I've sold on their Forstner bits now. But once you get everything drilled and set up, I'm going to start out with the bases. And this jam chuck that I'm passing around, you basically turn this to the 1-inch diameter that you've got for the hole. And when you set this up, you should slide that on. Can everybody see on the screen there? I leave a gap right here. And what I do is I turn this down to that 1.25 inches. So as I'm looking through to this, I can turn this outside diameter down real close to that. And that will get me to my 1.25 inches. It will fit up inside the roof. So I'm going to turn this down. And because you're working with turning stock, and everything's going horizontal here, I use my spindle roughing gouge on that just to get the shape, and then I'll finish up with a bowl gouge whenever I'm done. But I'll bring this up while I'm just getting it round and lock that down. What I'm going to do is just put a little bit of pressure right there. You don't want to get too much on there and just jam that thing up. If you get to where on this jam chuck, if it starts getting loose, after a while you put 40, 50 of them on there, it's going to start slipping. Put just a small piece of tape on there just to tighten it back up. And I just finally, that one Roger made me, I just finally made a new one this year. But I'm going to turn on, I'm going to get a little speed on this and get this thing turned down. Yep. Of course, it never works with you for a demo. At home, I fly right through these. That's why I get a little bit of tape to help that out. Tighten that up. What I'm doing is kind of a bell shape on there just to keep it simple. You're just bringing it down toward so you can see across there to get that 1.25 inch diameter. Okay. Now I'm just going to shave that bottom. That off there. So once I get a general shape going in there, the nice thing about this jam chuck is I've got a kind of a storage stick board here that I use, and I've got a go no-go gauge for the 1.25 inch. I've got my dimensions in here for where I put the holes in. On the back I've got instructions on what size stock I'm using. Stuff, I put this in a drawer because we do birdhouses once a year, and then I like, what was those dimensions? So I just keep all this in one drawer, and I've got everything right here. So what I do is because you got that jam chuck, I can go in there and see how close I am. Well, it's pretty tight, so I need to take a little bit more off. And then I'll get it close, and then I'll come back through and do my final cut in there. So I'll come back through here and trim that down again. So I'll check it one more time, and then we'll finish this one up. So we'll go in there and check it, and I'm going to more than fit in there. So if you get it where you're snug, or just right at it, where it's tight, it's going to go up in your roof at that point. So now I can finish turning this out, and then put finish on it, and then we'll go on to the next piece. I've got to round that bottom up a little bit more. So once I get that basic shape smooth enough, I can run through the grits of the sandpaper, and we'll have the bottom. So I'll run through 120, 180, 220, then 320. I'll turn that down some. I do. I used to drill the holes in the block before I started turning, and Terry Eiler pointed out to me one time that what he likes to do is he likes to find the grain section on there and put the hole where it looks like it's balanced. And sometimes if you drill that hole in the side of the block before you start turning it may not look balanced. So I switched that method to drilling it later. So I've gone through sanding of it, and Craig Schmidt did a pin turning demo several years ago, and he used this Ultra Shine Triple E, and I've had this thing. How long ago did you do that pin demo? 8, 9 years ago. I'm just now getting close to the bottom of this container after that long. It's like $20 for this stuff, but it's got microfines inside of the wax that will help buff out your sanding and will really bring it up. I'm not sure what it equates to, but you put it on there and it will smooth that up, and you just turn that and then you get it up to high speed once you get it worked in, and just work that back and forth, and that whatever that pumice or whatever they put in there will sand that up really nice.
That's like Yorkshire.
Yeah, it's just like that. Yorkshire, I think, is a new version of probably what this is. Now, Yorkshire may be a better version of this. That back when Craft Supply started putting stuff out, I think that was probably about the best we could get at the time. So it makes it really smooth. And then the next thing I do is I've got the recipe on here. Years ago, I found a Mylan's got a friction polish, but I've come across some of the guys on different woodworking forums, and they have the friction polish recipes out there, and it's 1/3. It's equal parts of denatured alcohol, boiled linseed oil, and Zinsser's wax. Yes, Mike.
And I use that same recipe. And I was whenever you're done, I was going to comment, and it works really well. I go a little bit heavier on the shellac and a little bit lighter on the linseed oil.
Yeah.
And that's what, that's from going through dozens of bottles of it at school.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's.
I've got another recipe I follow, but this one's simple for people to go 1/3, 1/3.
With the mineral oil and
Yeah.
wax.
Yeah, the one I give you, it's actually 2 parts shellac, 1 part of the denatured alcohol, and I forget what the word, it might be just,
I've never tried that one out.
okay. But it's just easy to use a quart jar and fill it up a third, and move on, so I've gone with that. But it puts a nice coating on there. Always shake it up before you use it, and each time when I set it down, you'll see I'll shake that a lot. In my shop, in my little shop that Tim French called my mouse house, I literally had very little room to walk in. I would turn around and use my table saw. Well, one day I turned around like this, and next thing I know, I got a motor full of shellac. So put your cap on there. So
What pound cup is your shellac?
it's that bullseye Zinsers I get up there at Home Depot. I'm not sure what cut it is. It's a clear.
Is it the sanding sealer or is it the actual shellac?
It's just shellac.
That's a 3-pound cut.
Is it 3?
The sanding sealer is supposed to be like a 2-pound cut.
But shellac works with friction and heat. Now you can put too much pressure on there and actually burn that and cause that to come off. So you'll figure out real quick when it starts scarring. But I'll pass this around here in a second. I'll need this back to drill it, but while I'm working on the other one, you'll pass around and see how smooth that this got that from that rough piece of wood. Yeah. From turning and taking that down, I'll pass those around. I'll need that back to finish up the birdhouse. So the next step I go to is I turn the roof on there, and you can change jaw chucks and stuff. I'm fortunate to have another set of jaws where I got the small one. I got to where I got tired of changing everything back and forth, so I just started buying extra chucks whenever I could to be able to do that. So I'm going to take this one off and switch chucks here. Now, one of the things you can do too is I turn that down to the 1.25 inches. Here's another chuck. I took a 1-inch dowel rod, and if you can get a perfect 1 inch to match your 1 inch or put tape on it, I put a screw in the end of it so when it starts wearing out, I can just pop that end off there. You'll see a little bit where I use this to drill on. So that's what I made this one for, is the drill with. So I'll go ahead and pass that one around as well so you can see how that's done. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do this stuff. This rooftop, you can actually, instead of a chuck, you can make a device like that with a screw in the end of it and make a scroll chuck and just turn the inside diameter to that 1.25 inches, put like a little bit of a nub on there, kind of like what Paul was showing with his piece popping in there and fitting on his Cole's jaws. You could make a piece to fit that, and like Alan was saying with his bump in where he was gluing, same concept, but put a screw in the end of it. When you tighten it on there, it would grip it for you. Is that worm screws? So for the top, and I do a pretty simple slope on this. I've seen where people get really fancy with the tops. And you can make some really extravagant birdhouses with this stuff. But like I said, I want to keep this simple for everybody that's brand new to this, because if you make it too difficult, then you don't want to do it. And we've got 250 birdhouses to make, so we want you to do it. Okay, so that one's locked down. Again, it's turning stock, so I can use my spindle roughing gouge. If on the base you're using a board instead of the turning stock, make sure you use a gouge on the side so that you don't splinter, because you got 2 different grains going. But if you're using all turning stock where the grains all run this way, you can get by with this tool. Sometimes I don't have 3-inch turning stock, so I chop a board flat and we'll turn that. But at that point, you got grain this way and grain that way, so you don't want this on there. You want your spindle gouge or your bowl gouge. So I'm going to turn this one and round it up. And one thing I do whenever I drill these holes, before I come over here, so I don't, it's hard to get down on this side to finish, I will take each one of these blocks and I'll bump it against my disc sander on the part that's going to go in here before I come to the lathe. So I clean every one of them up. So I'll go through 10 drilling functions on each one of these, and I'll go to drill press before I even get to the lathe. And that will help. If you don't have a disc sander, Joyce Baldoff years ago made one for the lathe and just turned the disc and put 6-inch sticky back sanding disc on there. And I still use the one I made from hers, and then for my 16-inch one, I made a 12-inch disc for it, and then set a table in here to mount, so I can come in with a table if I need to, if I don't have the disc sander. But that's just other ways that you can save money and make something pretty reasonable and stuff. So we've got that one. I'm going to switch over to the, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shape it upward. Basically, if you've seen that rooftop over there, all I'm doing is doing a sloping motion for the roof. Now, you can go in and put stepped roofs and stuff in here, but for just basics, when you first start out, just keep it simple. And then worry about later, you know, make a half dozen of them before you start changing it up. Just to get used to the technique and getting your system down. And my system that I've got here is just a combination between Roger Millfelt, everybody in this club, Terry Eiler. It's just different things I've seen from turning days or these demos. And then just, you know, like with a story stick, just kind of put my own little twist into there. So what I do, so I'll start sloping that up. And one thing with the roofs that you got to realize you got to kind of visualize where that 1.25 inch section is and how close you're going to get to the ends of those jaws, or you'll find out you have a roof that's now separated. And I've been there, and you will too before you start deciding maybe I don't need to go that far. Sometimes I just take that and just back cut that just a little bit. When I get up here close, I start taking that off there. Now you got it rounded up. Then you come up there and make that kind of small there at the top. Just kind of make a couple smoothing cuts, and at this point I can come in here a little bit more and kind of take that roof over. I almost kind of look at this as making a witch's hat. There are some guys out there who've done birdhouses that have made the witches. They look really cool. Somebody makes bats. Okay. A little bit smoother up in there. Alright, so I'm ready to do sanding. Run through your grits on your sanding. Get it all smoothed up. Okay. The same way I'll use that triple E on here, and we'll buff that out a little bit more. Just work that in back and forth and let that pumice do the work. You see how that triple E made that smooth on wherever that is for the top? Is that it over here? And a little bit of this stuff goes a long way. And we use the shellac again, shake it up. With those 3 compounds in there, they will separate after you're sitting for a little while. Let's see how that brings that shine right up with that shellac. And the next thing I do at this point before I take it off there is I used to go through and put it all together and put the eyelets in. I found it was easier to just do that while you're on the lathe. When I brought that tailstock up to put that little dimple in there, I've already got the start for my eyelet, and these are 1/8 inch eyelets by 1/2 inch long. But I use this as I get a little bit better torque on this than me trying to hang on to the birdhouse. And I'm able to put that eyelet screw in right now. Then you get the rooftop.
Ace Hardware carries those small eyelets.
Do they? And because you can't get into this area here, I just come through and touch it up. And one thing I did not bring is I use a lot in my shop those blue gloves you see like the hospital, those little nitro blue gloves, so you don't get all this stuff all over you. But you always forget something whenever you come here. So once I get that rooftop done, I'm gonna go ahead and put the base back on there and put the bottom together. Then we'll make the perch and then the base. Change this up.
So now what you say we could do if we don't have some jaws like that for our chuck, for the top of the bird? Jam chuck.
Use a jam chuck,
Oh, just like the
or like the little scroll where you put like a screw in the back. That piece I was putting around, if you take that dowel rod out, that screw inside's exposed, so you could actually use that to kind of hold it on, give it a little bit of grip. Look up scroll chuck,
Okay.
or worm gear on the internet.
It's like a worm screw, except you're creating your own instead of using a 3/8, you know, for a large piece. You just create one yourself.
I've got one here that did another jam chuck, and what I did was I just started with a big piece here, and all I'm doing is putting on there long enough to drill holes in it, because I end up messing this up, so I take it back a little farther, and then you go and just create a new one, just something that's got that inch diameter or so on there, just so you got something to work at to hold the piece while you're trying to drill it. Okay, I'm going to lock that in place. So with the base that I went around, I turned this around and looked for the best side, and I kind of like this arch area with the grain in there. I don't, can you see it on the screen, this arch area? So I'll position that up there, and on my story stick, I've got come down 5/8 from the top, and you put a 3/8 inch hole, and another 5/8 to do a 1/8 inch hole for the perch. So I'll go through and mark that, and I'll look at this and come down the, kind of find the center where that archway is. And I'll put a mark there, and then another 5/8 right there. And I'll use a punch and just get a couple starter holes. You can use a regular bit on this, but just either put a piece of blue tape over it, because your regular wood bits will tear that wood, where a forcer bit will cut. They've got a raised edge here to kind of slice the fibers of the wood in a circle before it actually starts cutting. So a forcer bit's a better way to do it, but if you don't have them, you can get by on the other one. And just kind of go slow with it. And I'm through there. So switch it out. And then this is a regular bit, so I gotta go a little slower with it. Now for this perch, for the longest time I used dowel rods. And just got 1/8 inch dowel rods, had a little stick sticking out there. And Gary Grunberg was turning perches one day, and I liked what he was doing with it. I'll pass this one around. This is what we're gonna make. And that to me looks a little bit better. It takes a little more time to do it, to make one of those, but it looks so much better on the birdhouses. So at that point, you're ready for assembly between that and the rooftop. And I'm gonna use some CA glue. And I'm going to put a little bead around the inside of that, kind of up on the sides there. And then I also try to match his grain pattern here with that grain pattern. And then we'll put those together and hold it for a minute. So while that CA glue sets up, it'll give you the start of what your little birdhouse is going to look like. Take that off of there.
Have you seen anybody try to make an acorn?
I have. Yep. They use one of the turning tools. It's got the spiral or the crosshatch pieces on it. I forget what the name of it is, but it's a set of roller wheels that cuts that look to it.
Merlin wheel.
What is it?
Merlin wheel.
My wife has to say she's never used it.
Yeah, the guy was the show side. That's what I'm thinking about digging one out of my metalworking thing I never used. Yeah.
Well, that's what we think ours. So maybe I'll try it on the
Okay. For that base with a 2-inch hole that I drill in there, I got enough to grip the jaws, and my jaws are got a pretty close to a 2-inch diameter on there. So I'm going to expand them outward and tighten that up. And then I'll bring this up pretty close, and we're going to round this one out as well and do the same triple E and that shellac finish on it as well. See if I can get that a little closer.
This was a board you just cut?
This was a turning stock. I took a log, and a lot of times when I'm milling out logs for our blanks, those little slabs you get off the end, I start looking, can I get a 2-inch run out of that, or 1.5 inches, and I'll take all the stuff. And Tim French had a bunch of logs here, about a year ago? We decided we just mill up the whole pile of them. And what we did was I was working off of a pile in my shelves from like 2009. I finally run out. I told Tim I needed to stock shelves, and he said, well, I got a bunch of cherry, and between him and I, we had cherry and walnut. We cut them up, and you let them sit for about a year to dry on the shelf and air dry, then you got turning stock for a long time.
So that's usually how long you would leave it after you cut
At least a year. The rule, like on flatboards, it's a year per inch of stock. 1.5 inches you're pretty close to a year. You might leave a little bit longer, but I'm right at, I think we did it in September, so I'm probably about 13 months in there, 12 to 13 months. But that's your first run, and next year it'll be 2 years old for everything, so everything will be completely dry that I've got sitting on the shelf. And then I've got some that I picked up the other day that a lady gave me. It's probably been sitting on the shelf for 30 years, and it's like powder. It's too dry. You can actually get wood that's too dry and it doesn't have enough moisture left in it, and it will just pulverize and go down. So, all right, well, I will take this one down now, and we'll finish up the base, then I'll do the perch. All I'm going to do is slope this back from the sides, kind of leave it high in the center. I'm just rounding those edges, give it a little bit of a presentation look. Okay. Now something I will ask some of the guys, I usually don't, I'm going to take that down a little farther. I usually don't do the round ones, I usually do a lot of the square bases. When you do the round, you pretty much gotta put the wire in the center. When you do the square bases, you can offset them to a corner. Okay, so I'll clean this up and put the finish on it. Okay, got the base done. The wire that we use, that I use on mine, is RG45 welding wire. Comes in 3-foot lengths. It's a 16th inch in diameter, and I cut them at 9 inches, so I get 4 of them out of each rod. Last year, Tim French and I found a deal on the internet. We got 20 pounds of the wire, so we each got 2 10-pound boxes I haven't even gotten into yet. I've got enough Birdhouse wire for a lifetime now on that stuff, but I a deal on that once in a while. But Buckeyes carries it, and usually most welding shops carry that 1/16 inch wire. You can go a little heavier. Some of it's a little hard to bend, and that 1/16 seems to at least form and still be stiff enough to hold the weight of the birdhouse up. So what I'm going to do is I put a 16th inch bit in there, and this is where the guys that turn round bases, I'd be curious what you do. I am just going to drill a hole through this, and what I've been doing is I'll put the wire through and I'll bend it back and put glue on it so it's got something to hang on to. Otherwise, you just put the wire down in a hole, a blind hole, even if you don't drill it all the way through. It wants to turn around and stuff, so I haven't figured out how to get that one to stay steady yet. So I'm going to turn the perch, and then we'll start the assembly.
You ever thought about whacking the end of that wire with the hammer to make a flat?
That might work.
Push it up through the bottom. So you
From the bottom side?
Yeah, push it through the bottom until the flat digs into the wood.
I'll have to try that and see.
From-
Yeah, because you know what, now that you say that, I work on clocks, and like the springs they put in, that's what they do with them. They put them in that way, and it keeps it from twisting. So I'll give that a try on one of these and see how it works with the wood.
Mike, can you get a show how to bend the wire?
Bam.
Would you do that though, would you be able to do that for on the base, bend the wire? Still bend the wire over the
You might be able to. What I do is I bend that loop, and then I put it together, and then I form it while it's on the base. There may be a better way to do that. I'm always open to suggestion on that one, but I have a lot of trouble with that part of it. As far as the perch, if you can get a hold of, like, I like the contrast of the cherry and walnut. Every now and then I run across somebody who's got the walnut dowels, so I'll use those. If not, every little piece of wood I get, I mean, we cut them down to 1 inch or 3/4 inch. These could be pin turning blanks that you can turn perches out of those, or anything you've got. You can even slice it a bunch of different directions and make smaller dowels out of them. So I'm going to turn this. Hopefully that works. So in that story stick, I've got a 1/8 inch hole here so I can get up there and size it, but it's starting to wallow out, so I may take the birdhouse base and actually check it out when I'm done. So I'm just going to turn the end of this enough to go inside that birdhouse bottom. And when you first do this, it takes a while, but after you've done enough of these, you'll get pretty close with it. I'll check that hole here, make sure it'll go in, and it'll fit there. So then once you get it to where you know it's gonna fit in there, then you can shape the rest of the perch. And I go about 1 inch long on this for the perch, and then I just kind of take that and slope that back a little bit. give yourself plenty of room here to work. Excuse me. And if you'll see what I'm doing here is once I cut this off, I've got to start to the next one and can keep going. I can slide that dowel rod outside there and keep making a couple, three out of this piece of dowel rod. So I'll clean that up real quick. A little bit of sandpaper. Same way with that triple E wax. Put it on here and brighten up that wood. And don't get it down on the part you're going to try to glue, because you'll need that bare wood for the glue to stick. I use a small skew to part that with, so I'll just come in there and once you get it off there, just hit it with a little bit of sandpaper on the end. Take that little nib off the end of it. Touch it with a little bit of your shellac just to coat the end of that up. And then you're ready to glue it to the base. Put that in there and just turn it, hold it for a minute till it sets. Got a little bit of blue tape in there. You can take a little sandpaper and kind of clean that out. As far as the birds, they take a little bit longer to glue on there, but I'll put a pretty good sized little bead of CA glue on there. And I've got some accelerator. I'll spray a little bit onto the perch and then put that bird
What
in
was
there.
it that you said you sprayed on there?
It's accelerator.
Oh.
It helps it dry a little bit quicker. And I'll hold that in place.
You're using medium CA?
Yeah. And then what I will do is, once that gets a little bit of tack on there, just put a little bit right there in that groove and let it set up. Then you got your birdhouse done. So our next step is bend the wire and put it on the base. Terry Eiler a few years back come in with, just drilled a hole in the side of a dowel rod and find one that fits. I've seen guys put them on coffee cans, a little bit of everything. What I do is I just slip that in there and give it a little bit of a bend. I rotate it around, and I found if I just bring it back to where it touches, then I can slip it off there, and I can pull that wire back out of there. and straighten it up. And then I just take a pair of needle nose pliers and we'll raise that up a little bit. And when I do this, the square stock, I'll put it over here where that birdhouse kind of hangs right down in the center. Well, when you do the round stock, I've been slipping through that hole. I've just been putting a little bit of a bend right here, but I'm gonna try what you talked about, putting it hammered out and see if it works. But I've just been putting a loop in it. So when I pull that back through, I've got something to hold it in the base so it doesn't pop out. And then I just take some of that CA glue and put down in that hole, some right over the top. Then let that dry. I'll hit it with a little bit of accelerator to help speed that up. So then, when I'm ready for the birdhouse, that's scanned so we don't have a mess. I'll start to bend this back, and I'll push that back a little bit and try to bring that back up where it sits in the center. So that whenever I put the birdhouse on there, hopefully it will hang right there. And this works well. The processes that Roger and Terry and all the guys I've learned from that jam chuck, when you're trying to do production work, it really speeds that up. And you get home, you're not in front of a bunch of people, it gets really quick. You can get 20. You do the next step, 20. And then you come back and across, do the bottoms one evening. Next evening do rooftops. And across a week you could be surprised how many of these you can knock out. Like Craig, you said you knock out 30 at a time.
Yeah.
So I will usually do 5s or 10s for myself whenever I do it. But since we got this project coming up, we got so many to do, I'll probably knock my 20 out in that same mode. I'll put everything, just keep the chuck going and keep a simple design for that. Stuff I give out for a gift or you're selling, you want to put a lot more work into it. A lot more time. I've put finials on the bottom, I burnt lines into them. One of my ventures is with the carving. I'm going to try doing a little bit of carving work on some of them at some point. But that's pretty much what it is to do a birdhouse. Yes, Keith?
I'd like to
30?
see carve the birds.
Carve the birds? that would be Mr. Collins here. You should see Dave Collins' work with birds. He's phenomenal at carving birds. Except his bird, you'd have to build a birdhouse. Because his birds are like this tall. And any questions I can answer for any of you?
So where can we go pick up the wire?
Buckeyes is usually where I pick it up at.
Where is Buckeyes?
Up there at Herculaneum. Or if you got is there a welding shop around so where are you at? Imperial? Look in there and see if there's like a CK welding and call them up and ask them if they have RG45 welding stock. I've got it written on this paper, so.
Or shell not.
There's this. Where did he say he needs it?
Who's that? Imperial?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're looking for 1/16 inch diameter or something close. I mean, if you get 3/32, you're close. If you start getting up to 1/8 inch, you're going to be, that's going to be a little stiff to work with.